Why can't a government just print more money to solve poverty? I mean, it seems like the ultimate quick fix, right?
If a government just prints more cash, well, it doesn't actually produce more goods and services. It literally just leads to rising prices across the board. You just end up paying a whole lot more money for the exact same amount of stuff. That doesn't solve poverty. Actually, it just causes inflation. So if printing money isn't the magic bullet, let's look at the real problem driving all of this and what the actual solution is.
All right, that brings us to Section 1, the core economic problem.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at a fundamental paradox of human existence. Let's contrast our needs with our wants. If you were to sit down and make a list of your true needs, the things that are absolutely critical just to stay alive, it's actually a pretty short list. We're talking about clean water, clothing for warmth and protection, basic food, and shelter. That's about it. But your wants, the things you would simply just like to own, come on, that list is virtually infinite. You might want a luxury house, the absolute newest smartphone, some high-end designer trainers, or hey, maybe a private helicopter in your own tropical island. The reality is, most people in the world cannot afford to buy everything they want, simply because our wants are completely, endlessly unlimited. And this brilliantly illustrates the real issue at play here, which I like to call the formula for scarcity. It's like a giant, unsolvable equation. When you take those unlimited human wants on one side and you combine them with severely limited resources on the other, the result is always scarcity. Scarcity just means there is a total lack of sufficient products to fulfill the absolute tidal wave of desires from the population. There quite literally aren't enough resources in the ground or hours in the day to make everything that everyone desires.
So the crucial takeaway here is understanding what these limited resources actually are. In economics, we call these the 4 factors of production. Think of them as the essential, non-negotiable ingredients needed to manufacture any good or provide any service. First up, we have land. Now, this isn't just physical dirt, it covers all natural resources provided by nature: fields, forests, oil and gas. Second is labor, the actual number of human beings available to go to work and make these products. Third is capital. This includes the finance, but also the machinery and the physical equipment needed to get the job done. And finally, enterprise. This is the distinct skill, the vision, and the risk-taking ability of the entrepreneur who steps up to bring the other 3 resources together. And here's the kicker. In any given country, and the world as a whole, every single one of these 4 factors is strictly limited in supply.
Because our resources are so limited, making choices becomes absolutely necessary. And listen, all choices involve giving something up. We call this opportunity cost. It is absolutely crucial to understand this because it operates at every single level of society. Think about it. If an individual chooses to spend their savings on a tropical holiday, the new car they suddenly can't afford, that becomes the opportunity cost. It's the next best alternative that they had to give up. The same goes for business. A company decides to buy machine A, which means buying machine B is the opportunity cost. And governments do this too. If they choose to fund a brand new road, the new school they can no longer afford to build is the opportunity cost. We all have to choose.
Okay, so if resources are desperately limited and we clearly can't have everything we want, how do we make the absolute most of what we do have? Welcome to Section 2, the power of specialization.
Let's track the evolution of production to really see how this works in practice. Imagine Joe Sharma, a carpenter from about 250 years ago. Joe did the whole shebang himself. He cut the wood, he assembled the table, he spent hours polishing it by hand, and then he delivered it on his horse-drawn cart. His production output was very low. We're talking maybe 1 table a week. Now, fast forward to his modern descendant, Jack Sharma. Jack runs the family business today, and he heavily relies on the division of labor. He has one specialist machine that only cuts the wood. He has a specific team of carpenters who literally only assemble. Another department just polishes, and a totally separate transport business handles delivery. By dividing the whole process into distinct jobs and turning his workers into true specialists, Jack drastically increases his efficiency and his output while wasting a fraction of the time.
And look, this isn't just a concept for making wooden furniture. As a CEO, I look at massive global companies like McDonald's as an absolute masterclass in specialization. If you look inside a McDonald's kitchen, the entire cooking process is broken down into incredibly small, highly repetitive tasks. You have one person rapidly pouring drinks, another continuously cooking fries, another just grilling burgers, and another solely focused on serving customers. Doing this allows those workers to become incredibly skilled and lightning fast at their specific task. That speed means customers get fresh food almost instantly, and crucially for the business, it keeps costs and prices very, very low. Now, I have to give a quick caveat. Flipping those exact same burgers all day long can make workers pretty bored, which sometimes leads to high staff turnover. But strictly mathematically, the efficiency gains for the business are completely undeniable.
So, we've talked about unlimited wants, limited resources, and how specialization helps us maximize efficiency. But where does the actual, formal concept of a company fit into all of this? That brings us to Section 3, why businesses actually exist.
The definitive, foundational answer is this. The purpose of all business activity is to combine scarce factors of production to make products, meaning both physical goods and invisible services, that satisfy people's wants. Just think about it for a second. In a truly primitive society, people try to be completely self-sufficient. They hunt their own food, build their own shelter, make their own clothes. And frankly, that leads to a very basic, exhausting, and incredibly low standard of living. But by forming businesses, employing specialized workers, and paying them wages, people can use that money to go out and buy a vast array of goods made by other specialized businesses. Businesses are literally the engines we built to process scarce resources into human satisfaction.
Now, putting on both my lecturer and CEO hats here, if there is one single thing I want you to remember from our session today, it is Section 4, the secret to adding value. This concept is quite literally the secret to survival for any business on the planet.
Simply put, all businesses must attempt to add value. If they don't, they simply cannot survive. It's really that black and white. Let's look at the mechanics of this. Added value is the difference between the selling price of a product and the cost of the bought-in materials and components used to make it. Imagine a large block representing the selling price. Now subtract a smaller block representing the cost of raw materials. Whatever is left over, that is the value added by the business. But please, and I see business students get this wrong all the time, do not confuse added value with profit. Out of that added value margin, the business still has to pay for its labor costs, management expenses, advertising, electricity, you name it. Profit is only what's left over at the very end, assuming those running costs are less than the added value.
Let's ground this math in a tangible, real-world example we all recognize, the everyday cola can. The physical cost of the raw materials, the aluminum for the can itself, the water, the sugar, the syrup, it's remarkably low. Dirt cheap, really. But the selling price you pay at the store is much, much higher. The space between that raw material cost and the selling price is the added value. That specific margin is the only thing that allows the cola company to pay its factory workers, run its massive global marketing campaigns, and ultimately, hopefully, generate a profit. If they didn't figure out a way to add value to those basic, cheap ingredients, the company would collapse overnight.
So as a business owner, how do you actually increase it? Well, you essentially have two main levers you can pull. Strategy A, you increase the selling price, but you keep the cost of materials exactly the same. You usually do this by creating a higher quality brand image. Think of a luxury jewelry shop. They decorate the store beautifully, they employ expert staff, all to convince consumers the product is worth a massive premium. Then you have strategy B. You reduce the cost of materials, but you keep the selling price the same. A building firm might decide to use slightly cheaper wood or bricks to widen their margin, but you really have to beware here. Lower priced materials can drastically reduce the actual quality of the product, and if customers notice, they might flat out refuse to pay the original price. Adding value is a very tricky balancing act.
Let me give you two of my absolute favorite real-world examples of businesses successfully pulling that first lever. First up, the Lego Group. They take tiny little plastic bricks, which cost next to nothing, and they add massive value by organizing them into intricate, themed sets. And when they link those sets to wildly successful movie franchises like Harry Potter or Star Wars, it strengthens the brand so much that consumers happily pay a premium price just for the added value. Then, on a totally different scale, there's Rakesh. Rakesh owned a small bakery and was really struggling to survive. His wife, Nita, had a brilliant idea. Put 2 small cafe tables right there in the bakery. Instead of just selling a cake in a paper bag to go, they started serving it on a beautiful plate with a nice cup of tea or coffee. Customers gladly paid a significantly higher price for the exact same slice of cake simply because of the cafe experience. Rakesh managed to increase the added value of his flour, sugar, and butter without changing a single thing about his recipe.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the infinite wants and scarce resources that completely define our world, to the incredible, game-changing power of specialization, right down to the math of adding value that keeps the lights on in businesses big and small. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Next time you buy something, whether it's a cup of coffee, a new video game, or a pair of shoes, I want you to ask yourself 2 things. How did this business add value to the raw materials? And what was the opportunity cost of my purchase? What did I have to give up? Once you start looking at the world through this lens, the whole blueprint of business just opens up to you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep learning.